I am Damaris, 32 years old, and until 2 weeks ago, I was the dutiful eldest daughter who always did what was expected. Then my parents demanded I empty my life savings of $75,000 for my sister Isabel's startup. When I refused, their words cut deep. How dare you refuse to help your sister? You have always been selfish. I did not argue. I simply walked away. This morning, I finally turned on my phone to find 6 urgent calls waiting. If you are watching this from your phone, hit subscribe and share where you would escape to if family pressure became too much. My story might show you why sometimes walking away is the only way to be understood. Growing up in a middle-class neighborhood on the north side of Chicago, I learned early that being the oldest daughter meant one thing: responsibility. Our modest 2-story brick house with the small backyard was where I first understood that my sister Isabel and I lived under different sets of rules. My parents, both teachers at the local high school, had clear expectations for me as the eldest. Damaris, you need to set an example, became the soundtrack of my childhood, starting when I was just 7 and Isabel was 4. While other kids my age spent weekends riding bikes or having sleepovers, I was expected to help with chores, watch my sister, and maintain perfect grades. Why do I always have to wash dishes while Isabel gets to watch television? I asked my mother one evening when I was 12. She barely looked up from her grading papers. Because you are older and need to learn responsibility. Your sister is still young. This pattern continued throughout our childhood. When I wanted to join the school band in 6th grade, my parents told me it would interfere with my academic focus. Yet 2 years later, they drove Isabel to private dance lessons 3 times a week, rearranging the family's schedule to accommodate her passion. Our bedrooms told the story without words. Mine was practical, with secondhand furniture and bookshelves filled with classics. My parents insisted would help my education. Isabel's room got redecorated every few years, with trendy furniture posters of her favorite bands and a television she received for her 12th birthday. When I asked for similar items, the answer was always the same. We cannot afford extravagances. You need to be practical, Damaris. By high school, the differences became even more pronounced. I worked part-time at the local grocery store, saving most of my earnings for college while contributing to household expenses. Isabel received an allowance without expectations. She spent weekends at the mall with friends while I divided my time between studying and household responsibilities. My 16th birthday remains particularly vivid in my memory. I had hoped for a small gathering with my few close friends, nothing elaborate. The day arrived and my parents announced we needed to attend Isabel's regional dance competition instead. We can celebrate your birthday next weekend, my father said, not noticing my disappointment. My birthday cake ended up being a hasty afterthought, served at 11 at night when we returned home after celebrating Isabel's 3rd-place trophy at her favorite ice cream parlor. You are almost an adult now, my mother explained, when she saw my eyes glistening. Surely you understand these opportunities are important for your sister's future. The college decision process crystallized everything. Despite maintaining a 3.9 GPA and participating in volunteer work that left me little personal time, my parents directed me toward practical options. Art history is a hobby, not a career, my father lectured when I expressed interest in that field. Finance will give you stability. Isabel, meanwhile, was encouraged to follow her heart and explore her creativity. My parents spent thousands on summer arts programs for her, while I worked extra shifts to afford my textbooks. Your sister is different, my mother explained, during one particularly heated discussion. She has a creative spirit that needs nurturing. You have always been more practical and independent. The irony was that I had never been given the chance to be anything else. Despite everything, I loved my family deeply. Each time the inequality stung, I told myself they must have their reasons. Perhaps they saw strength in me that they did not see in Isabel. Maybe one day they would recognize my sacrifices and dedication. I excelled in the finance program they chose for me at the state university, graduating with honors while working 30 hours weekly to minimize student loans. At my graduation dinner, my parents raised a toast to Damaris, always reliable and sensible. It felt more like an acknowledgement of my utility than a celebration of achievement, especially when they added, "Now you will be able to build a stable future and help the family when needed." Looking back, I realized those words foreshadowed everything that would eventually break apart our family dynamic. But at 22, still hopeful for parental approval, I simply smiled and nodded, unaware of how those expectations would one day force me to choose between my own dreams and their demands. The 3 years following college graduation were a blur of 14-hour workdays, evening MBA classes, and fleeting weekends spent catching up on laundry and sleep. While my former classmates posted vacation photos from European beaches and Mexican resorts on social media, I was building something more enduring: independence. My entry-level position at Weston Financial was demanding but offered excellent experience. I arrived at 6:30 each morning, prepared reports until the senior advisors arrived, then spent my days in client meetings and financial analysis. 3 nights weekly, I rushed from the office to evening MBA classes, often eating dinner from vending machines between work and school. "You are going to burn out," warned Jessica, a colleague who became one of my closest friends. "When was the last time you did something just for fun?" I could not remember. The rare times I allowed myself leisure, guilt followed. Every hour not working or studying felt like betrayal of my goals. Independence had become my obsession after years of feeling indebted to my family. I wanted to prove something, not just to them, but to myself. By 25, I had completed my MBA, earned 2 promotions, and saved enough for a down payment on a small 1-bedroom condominium in a modest Chicago neighborhood. The space was barely 700 square feet, but every inch belonged to me. I painted the walls myself, installed floating shelves for my growing book collection, and bought a second-hand piano to rekindle my childhood interest in music that had been discouraged. My financial discipline bordered on extreme. I tracked every expense in detailed spreadsheets, brought lunch from home, and found creative ways to stretch my budget. Designer work clothes came from consignment shops. Haircuts happened twice yearly at training academies where students practiced on willing models. My one splurge was quality coffee beans for the mornings when I needed extra motivation. At work, I built a reputation for thoroughness and insight. Clients requested me specifically for my straightforward approach to explaining complex financial concepts. By 27, I began receiving offers from other firms, which I leveraged for another promotion and salary increase. "You should treat yourself to something special," suggested Alicia, another close friend who worked in my building. We had met during a charity fundraiser and bonded over our shared workaholic tendencies. "You never celebrate your victories." What neither Alicia nor Jessica fully understood was that I was working towards something bigger than momentary pleasures. Every extra dollar went into a special savings account labeled Independent Practice. My dream was to establish my own financial consulting firm, helping people like me who came from families without financial literacy. I wanted to create a practice centered on education and empowerment rather than selling products clients did not understand. Meanwhile, my relationship with my family continued its established patterns. I visited for Sunday dinners twice monthly. listening to my parents praise Isabel's latest pursuits, while accepting my accomplishments with expectations of more. After graduating with an unremarkable record from a small liberal arts college, Isabel had cycled through 4 jobs in 3 years. "Your sister is finding her passion," my mother explained, after Isabel quit her marketing assistant position to try interior design. "Not everyone knows their path immediately, like you did." The irony that my path had been chosen for me went unacknowledged. "You should help your sister with her resume," my father suggested over dessert. "Your business experience would be valuable to her." I offered, but Isabel never followed up. 3 months later, she abandoned interior design for a photography workshop that my parents paid for, despite their retirement accounts needing attention. When I gently suggested financial prudence, my mother dismissed the concern. "Money is meant to be used, Damaris. You save everything like there will not be a tomorrow. That is no way to live." My attempts to explain the difference between careful planning and miserliness fell on deaf ears. In their eyes, Isabel was creative and visionary, while I was rigid and unimaginative. Their perception stung, but I had learned to accept the family dynamic while building my separate life. By my 30th birthday, my independent practice fund had grown to nearly $60,000. I estimated needing $100,000 to launch properly, with office space, licensing software, and enough runway to build a client base. With my savings rate, I projected reaching my goal within 18 months. Then came the phone call that would ultimately shatter the fragile balance I had maintained between personal ambition and family obligation. My mother, unusually animated, called on a Tuesday evening while I reviewed client portfolios. "Your sister has the most amazing business idea," she gushed without preamble. "She has been working on it for months. We are having a special family dinner this Saturday to discuss it. You absolutely must attend, Damaris. This could change everything for her." I agreed, suppressing my skepticism. Isabel had announced revolutionary ideas, before none of which materialized beyond initial enthusiasm. Still, I marked my calendar, rescheduled my Saturday morning client, and prepared to be supportive despite my reservations. I could not have anticipated how that dinner would force me to choose between my carefully built future and my family's expectations. Nor could I have predicted that within 10 days I would be living in a different state. My phone turned off, cutting ties with the people who were supposed to value me for more than what I could provide them. The familiar scent of my mother's pot roast filled the house when I arrived that Saturday evening, precisely at 6:30 as requested. Family dinners typically began casually around 7, but the formal time signaled this was indeed a special occasion. My father answered the door wearing a button-down shirt instead of his usual weekend flannel, another indication of the evening's importance. "There she is," he said, embracing me briefly. "Everyone is in the dining room already." That was unusual. My mother normally bustled around the kitchen until the last minute, while my father and I made small talk in the living room. Entering the dining room, I found my mother arranging water glasses beside the good china, reserved for holidays and special announcements. Isabel sat at the table with an open laptop and a stack of glossy presentation folders. "Damaris." My sister jumped up to hug me, her enthusiasm uncharacteristic of our typically cordial but distant relationship. At 25, Isabel had grown into her beauty, with our mother's delicate features and naturally wavy hair that I had always envied during my awkward teenage years of frizz and failed straightening attempts. "I have been waiting all week to share this with you," she continued, gesturing to the seat beside her, where a folder waited with my name, handwritten on the cover. "I wanted everyone together for the big reveal." Dinner proceeded with unusual efficiency, my mother serving pre-plated portions rather than the typical family-style passing of dishes. Conversation remained superficial comments about the unusually warm spring, a cousin's new baby, a neighbor's landscape renovation. The anticipation built deliberately until dessert arrived, at which point my father cleared his throat. "Isabel has something very important to present to us," he announced, with unmistakable pride. "We have already seen a preview, but she wanted to wait until you were here for the full presentation." My sister stood and moved to the head of the table, opening her laptop with a practiced flourish. "Thank you all for coming together." Tonight, she began as though addressing a boardroom rather than her family of four. "I am excited to introduce you to what will revolutionize the dating landscape's algorithm." For the next 20 minutes, Isabel outlined her concept, a dating application that would use artificial intelligence to predict compatibility based on personality assessments, social media analysis, and biological markers collected through smartphone sensors. Users would complete extensive questionnaires, grant access to their online presence, and even record their pulse while viewing potential matches' photos. The AI can predict with 98% accuracy whether two people will have chemistry, she claimed, with absolute confidence. It eliminates the guesswork and wasted time of traditional dating. I listened carefully, noting the absence of crucial details. How had this 98% accuracy been determined? What algorithms would process this data? Who would develop the complex AI systems she described? Most importantly, what qualifications did Isabel have to launch such a technically sophisticated platform? When she finished with a dramatic flourish, my parents applauded enthusiastically. "Is not this incredible?" my mother asked, turning to me expectantly. "It is certainly ambitious," I replied carefully. "May I ask a few questions?" Isabel nodded magnanimously. "Of course. I have anticipated most concerns in my business plan." "Who is developing the AI component?" I asked. "That requires specialized expertise." "I will hire developers, obviously," she answered dismissively. "The important part is the concept, which is 100% mine." "Have you researched the dating app market?" "It is highly saturated and dominated by established players with massive user bases." Isabel's smile tightened slightly. "My concept is completely different. Did you not hear the part about biological markers? Nobody else is doing that." "Because it might raise significant privacy concerns," I noted gently. "Have you consulted with any legal experts about data collection regulations?" My father interrupted before Isabel could respond. "Damaris, your sister is not looking for problems. She is sharing an exciting opportunity." "I am just asking questions any investor would ask," I explained, trying to keep my tone supportive. "These are important considerations." "Well," my mother interjected brightly, "the exciting news is that we are moving forward with this. Your father and I have already committed to investing $50,000 from our retirement fund to get things started." I nearly choked on my coffee. 50,000. That is a significant portion of your retirement savings. "Some things are worth the risk," my father said firmly. "We believe in your sister's vision." Isabel beamed at them before turning to me. "And that is where you come in, Damaris. We need additional capital to make this happen properly. I need $75,000 more to secure the development team and launch the marketing campaign." The room fell silent as I processed her words. $75,000. Almost exactly the amount I had saved for my own business, the culmination of years of sacrifice and planning. That island. "A significant amount," I said finally. "Have you approached any professional investors?" Isabel waved her hand dismissively. "They will want too much control and equity. This needs to stay in the family so we can all benefit when it takes off." "I notice your business plan does not include financial projections or market analysis." I continued, flipping through the glossy folder that contained mostly conceptual descriptions and mock-up designs. Without those, it would be difficult for any investor to evaluate the opportunity properly. Not everything can be reduced to spreadsheets, Damaris, my mother said with a hint of impatience. Sometimes you need faith in people you love. I do have faith in Isabel, I responded carefully. But even the best ideas need solid planning. I would suggest starting smaller, perhaps, with a prototype or focus group testing before investing such large sums. We do not have time for baby steps, Isabel insisted, her voice rising slightly. This market moves quickly. If we wait, someone else will develop something similar. Then perhaps seeking venture capital would be appropriate, I suggested. They specifically fund high-risk, high-reward concepts like this. You just do not want me to succeed, Isabel said, suddenly her eyes narrowing. You have always been jealous that I pursue my dreams while you play it safe. That is not true, I protested, genuinely hurt by the accusation. I am trying to help you approach this professionally. If you were truly supportive, my father interjected, you would not be raising all these obstacles. Your sister needs your help, not your criticism. It is not criticism to ask basic questions about a business plan before investing $75,000, I explained, feeling increasingly cornered. That represents years of saving on my part. And what are you saving for that is more important than helping your sister? My mother demanded. Some distant future that might never come. Family supports each other in the present. Actually, I have been saving to start my own financial consulting practice. I admitted having never shared this dream with them before. I am less than 2 years away from my goal. There was a moment of silence before Isabel laughed incredulously. A financial practice? Seriously, you would prioritize something boring like that over a revolutionary tech startup. This is exactly why I hesitated to ask you for help. Your practice can wait, my father said dismissively. This opportunity for your sister will not. You can always restart your savings after Solgarithm succeeds. As they continued pressing me, their assumptions became clear. My dreams were dispensable. My sister's were essential. My savings existed not for my future, but as a family emergency fund to be accessed whenever needed. Most painfully, they genuinely could not understand why I would hesitate to hand over everything I had worked for. By the end of the evening, lines had been drawn that would prove impossible to cross. What had begun as a startup presentation had revealed the true dynamics of our family in ways I could no longer ignore or excuse. I cannot invest $75,000 in this project, I finally stated after nearly an hour of circular arguments. My voice was calm but resolute, having weathered their increasingly emotional appeals. It represents my entire financial future, and I do not believe the business plan is developed enough to justify that level of investment. My father's face flushed deep red, a vein pulsing at his temple. How dare you refuse to help your sister after everything this family has done for you? What exactly has this family done for me that I have not repaid tenfold? The question escaped before I could temper it, releasing years of unspoken resentment. We raised you, educated you, supported you, my mother countered, her voice trembling with indignation. And now when we ask for your help, you turn your back on us. I am not turning my back on anyone, I explained, struggling to maintain composure. I am simply saying, this particular investment does not make financial sense. I would be happy to help Isabel develop a more structured business plan, connect her with proper investors, or contribute a smaller amount to a prototype development. A smaller amount, Isabel scoffed. Like what, a few $1,000s a day? That will not even cover the initial design work. Perhaps that indicates the concept needs refinement, I suggested. Starting smaller would allow you to test assumptions before committing massive resources. There you go again, always thinking small, my father interrupted. Your sister thinks big. That is why she will be successful while you count pennies for the rest of your life. Each word landed like a physical blow, confirming what I had long suspected in their eyes. My financial responsibility was a character flaw rather than a virtue. My careful planning was evidence of limited vision, not disciplined foresight. You have always been selfish, Damaris, my mother added, her voice hardening. Always keeping score, always holding back. Selfish? I repeated, genuinely astonished. I started working at 16 to help with household expenses. I chose the college and major you wanted. I visit regularly, help with repairs around the house, and have never asked for anything in return. How exactly does that qualify as selfish? A tense silence followed before my mother spoke again, her voice quieter but more cutting. You want to know what we did with your college fund. The money your grandparents left specifically for your education. My father shot her a warning look, but she continued. We had to use it to pay off credit card debt from Isabel's dance competitions and special summer programs. We always meant to replace it, but never could. That is why you had to take student loans, while Isabel went to college debt-free. The revelation struck like lightning, illuminating decades of family dynamics in one blinding flash. Money that had been specifically designated for me had been redirected to my sister without my knowledge, while I worked multiple jobs to minimize the loans I now understood had been unnecessary. I see was all I could manage, my mind racing to recalibrate 32 years of family history. We did what we had to do, my father defended. Isabel needed those opportunities. She has always been the one with the bright future in this family. The room fell completely silent. Had he realized what he had just said, I looked at my sister, expecting perhaps a hint of embarrassment or discomfort at such a blatant statement of favoritism. Instead, I found her smirking slightly, a look of vindication in her eyes. In that moment, something fundamental shifted within me. All the years of telling myself it was my imagination, that my parents did not truly favor my sister, that my contributions were valued, even if rarely acknowledged, collapsed under the weight of undeniable truth. I had never been, nor would I ever be, an equal member of this family. Memories cascaded through my mind. Birthdays overlooked, achievements, minimized sacrifices expected rather than appreciated. The constant message, subtle but persistent: Isabel matters more. Isabel deserves more. Isabel is more. And now, they expected me to sacrifice my dream, the independent future I had worked tirelessly to build, to fund another of her impulsive ventures. Not as a carefully considered investment, but as an obligation, my refusal evidence of moral failure rather than financial prudence. I need to leave, I said quietly, gathering my purse and the untouched business proposal. That is it. You are just walking away, my mother demanded. We are not finished discussing this. Yes, we are, I replied, with a calm that surprised even me. There is nothing more to discuss. I will not be investing in Solgorithm. You have always abandoned your sister when she needed you most, my father accused. Always too busy with your own priorities to support her dreams. And you have always abandoned me in favor of hers, I responded, without heat, stating it as simple fact rather than recrimination. The difference is that I have stopped expecting anything different. I stood up, picked up my handbag, and walked out of the dining room without another word. No one followed me to the door. No one called after me as I stepped into the cool evening air. The silence behind me spoke volumes about where I stood in the family hierarchy. Driving home, I felt oddly light, as though I had set down a burden I had carried for so long I had forgotten its weight. By the time I reached my condominium, a plan was already forming in my mind. The next morning, I requested a meeting with my supervisor at Weston Financial. I need to take a personal leave, I explained. 2 weeks, possibly longer. She looked concerned. Everything okay, Damaris? This is not like you. It will be, I assured her. I just need some time to reorganize my life. That afternoon, I contacted a real estate agent in Seattle, a city I had visited once for a financial conference and had been drawn to immediately. The agent emailed listings within my budget by evening. I spent the night researching neighborhoods' employment opportunities and the logistics of long-distance moving. By Wednesday, I had submitted rental applications for 3 apartments and begun reaching out to financial firms in Seattle. On Thursday, I was approved for a small studio in the Ballard neighborhood, 20 minutes from downtown. Friday, I arranged for movers to pack and transport the essentials from my condominium, placing the rest in storage. Throughout this whirlwind of activity, my phone remained silent. No calls from my parents asking about my abrupt departure from dinner. No messages from Isabel attempting to persuade me to reconsider. Their silence confirmed what their words had revealed. Without my financial contribution, I held little value to them. 1 week after the fateful dinner, I boarded a plane with 2 suitcases and a laptop bag, leaving behind the only city I had ever called home. As the aircraft lifted through the clouds, I turned off my phone, severing the last tether to a family that had never truly seen me. Seattle greeted me with uncharacteristic sunshine, as though welcoming me to my new beginning. My studio apartment was smaller than my Chicago condominium, just 500 square feet with a kitchenette and a view of a brick wall, but it represented something priceless. Freedom from expectations that were never mine to begin with. The first few days passed in a practical blur of furniture deliveries, grocery shopping, and navigating public transportation. I kept my phone powered off, extending my self-imposed isolation from everyone from my previous life, except Jessica, whom I emailed from my laptop using a newly created account. I needed a fresh start, I wrote, providing my new address, but asking her not to share it. I will be in touch when I am ready, but for now, I need space to think. My faithful friend responded with characteristic understanding. Take all the time you need. Your family has taken advantage of your generosity for years. Just let me know you are safe occasionally. With the basic necessities established, the reality of my situation began to sink in during the second week. Sitting at a small cafe near Pike Place Market, watching ferries cross Elliott Bay beneath a pearl gray sky, I allowed myself to fully process the magnitude of what I had done. I had not just left my family after an argument. I had uprooted my entire life, abandoned a successful career track, and moved to a city where I knew absolutely no one. Fear competed with exhilaration as I sipped overpriced coffee and watched strangers pass by. Had I overreacted? Should I have attempted one more conversation before such a drastic step? Then I remembered my father's words. Isabel has always been the one with the bright future in this family. 32 years distilled into a single, unambiguous statement of where I stood in the family hierarchy. No, I had not overreacted. I had finally reacted appropriately after decades of minimizing, excusing, and accommodating behavior that constantly diminished me. Mind if I share your table? The place is packed. I looked up to find a woman about my age, gesturing to the empty chair across from me. With short, dark hair and friendly eyes, she balanced a mug of tea and a laptop bag precariously. "Please go ahead," I replied, welcoming the distraction from my thoughts. "Thanks. I am Olivia, by the way. I live in the building, across from yours, I think. The blue Victorian converted to apartments. That is me. I just moved in last week. I am Damaris." Chicago accent, she asked, arranging her things. Is it that obvious? My brother lives there. I recognize the flat vowels, she said with a smile. New job, bring you out west. New life, actually, I answered, surprising myself with the candor. I needed a change. Something in my tone must have communicated more than my words, because she nodded with unexpected understanding. Sometimes a geographical cure actually works. Seattle is good for reinvention. Nobody asks too many questions. That brief encounter evolved into my first Seattle friendship. Olivia, a graphic designer who worked remotely, became my informal guide to the city, showing me neighborhood farmers, markets, hidden bookstores, and quiet beaches, where we could watch the sunset with takeout containers of Thai food balanced on our knees. You know you have never mentioned your family, she observed one evening, 3 days after we met, as we watched the sky turn from orange to purple over the Olympic Mountains. That is intentional, I replied. Fair enough, she said, not pushing further. Found work yet? I had submitted applications to several financial firms, but had yet to hear back. Not yet. I have interviews next week. No rush, right? Sounds like this move was about more than employment. She was right. For the first time since college, I had given myself permission to pause to evaluate what I truly wanted rather than what was expected of me. I spent mornings exploring my new neighborhood, afternoons reading books I had never had time for, and evenings writing in a journal documenting thoughts and feelings I had suppressed for years. I do not even know who I am when I am not being responsible for everyone else, I wrote one night. What do I actually enjoy? What matters to me beyond meeting obligations and saving for some future that keeps getting postponed? These questions had never seemed relevant before. My identity had been so thoroughly defined by utility and responsibility that considering my own preferences felt almost selfish, echoing my mother's accusation. Yet gradually I began discovering simple truths about myself. I loved classical music but had never attended live performances in Chicago because the tickets seemed frivolously expensive. In Seattle, I discovered the symphony offered discounted rush tickets, and I attended my first concert alone. Moved to Tears by Rachmaninoff performed live. I enjoyed cooking elaborate meals, but had always prepared practical, efficient nutrition in Chicago. Now I spent Sunday afternoons experimenting with recipes, inviting Olivia over to sample the results, finding unexpected joy in the creative process rather than just the practical outcome. Most surprisingly, I discovered a passion for sailing. A community center near the marina offered affordable weekend lessons, and I found profound peace on the water, learning to read wind and current mastering knots and navigation. The methodical precision appealed to my analytical mind, while the unpredictable elements of weather and water challenged my need for control. 10 days into my self-imposed exile, I powered on my laptop to find an email from Jessica. Thought you should know Isabel's startup fell apart yesterday. The investors she was counting on backed out after reviewing her business plan. Your parents are upset but not contacting you directly. They think you will reach out eventually. Are you okay? I wrote back thanking her for the update, but offering no details about my situation. I need more time, I concluded, but I am better than I have been in years. It was true. Despite the lingering sadness and anger, I felt lighter than I had in decades. Without the constant pressure to prove my worth through sacrifice and service, I was discovering parts of myself long buried under obligation and expectation. The following day brought unexpected professional news, an offer from Cascade Financial Advisors, a boutique firm specializing in women's financial independence. The position offered less money than my Chicago role, but provided greater autonomy and aligned perfectly with my long-term goals of opening my own practice. We were impressed by your focus on financial education rather than just investment sales, the hiring manager explained during our call. When can you start? Next Monday, I replied, without hesitation, ready to build the professional aspect of my new life. That evening, as I celebrated with takeout sushi in my tiny apartment, I felt a pang of guilt about my continued silence toward my family. 2 weeks had passed without contact. Did that make me the selfish person they had accused me of being? Was I punishing them by disappearing? I opened my journal and reread entries from the past years, documenting dozens of instances where my needs had been dismissed, my achievements minimized, my sacrifices expected rather than appreciated. This was not about punishment. It was about protection. For the first time, I was prioritizing my own well-being over family approval. Still, they were my family. Despite everything, I could not deny the love that remained tangled with the hurt. Maybe tomorrow, I told myself, placing my phone on the nightstand. I will call them tomorrow. But in the morning, another email from Jessica changed everything. Isabel is telling everyone your parents invested their entire retirement fund in her startup after initial investors backed out. She says they took out a second mortgage too. Things are apparently dire. I thought you should know, but please do not feel obligated to rescue them. You have done enough. The news hit like a physical blow. Despite my anger, I had never wished financial ruin on my parents. Had my departure somehow triggered this desperate doubling down on Isabel's failed venture? My finger hovered over the power button of my phone. 2 weeks of silence. What would I find when I turned it on? Part of me wanted to maintain the boundary I had established to protect the fragile new self I was discovering. Another part recognized that regardless of past hurts, a family crisis might require my attention. With a deep breath, I pressed the button, watching as the screen illuminated and notifications began to appear. 6 missed calls, all from family members. 6 voicemails waiting to be heard. Whatever they contained would determine whether my new beginning in Seattle was truly a fresh start or merely a temporary escape from patterns too deeply ingrained to break. The phone vibrated continuously as text messages, voicemails, and missed call notifications flooded in. I set it on the kitchen counter, watching it buzz against the laminate surface like some agitated insect, and waited for the digital deluge to subside. When silence finally returned, I poured myself a glass of water, sat at my small dining table, and prepared to confront whatever awaited. 6 voicemails, chronologically ordered, telling a story through their timestamps alone. The first arrived 3 days after I left the most recent just yesterday. I pressed play on the first message and heard Isabel's voice, indignant and accusatory. Damaris, where are you? Nobody can reach you. Your work says you took leave. Are you seriously hiding because we asked for your help? The investors are getting nervous because we do not have enough capital. This is your fault. Call me back immediately. No concern for my well-being. No acknowledgement that I might have had legitimate reasons for distance. Just blame and demands, as though my primary value was financial contribution to her venture. I deleted the message and moved to the next. My mother's voice came through her tone, a practiced blend of worry and guilt induction. Damaris, honey, we have not heard from you in nearly a week. We are getting concerned. I know things got heated at dinner, but family disagreements happen. Please call us and let us know you are okay. Your sister really needs your support right now with her business. Call us, please. Again, the underlying message was clear. Whatever my feelings, they were secondary to Isabel's needs. I continued to the third message from my father. This disappearing act is childish and irresponsible, Damaris. You have obligations to this family. Your sister's business partners are asking questions about funding, and we told them you would be contributing. Now we look foolish. This silent treatment needs to end. Call your mother. She is worried sick. I took a deep breath, reminding myself that his perspective had been shaped by decades of family dynamics we all participated in. Still, his words stung. Childish, irresponsible. The only time I had ever prioritized my needs over family expectations, and these were the labels applied. The fourth message marked a shift in tone. Isabel again, but subdued her voice, lacking its usual confidence. Damaris, I do not know if you are getting these messages. I need to talk to you. The investors backed out yesterday. They said the business plan was not viable and the market was too saturated. You were right about everything. I should have listened. Please call me. I do not know what to do now. A knot formed in my throat. Despite everything, I took no pleasure in being right. I could hear the fear beneath my sister's words, the unfamiliar territory of failure she had rarely been allowed to experience. The fifth message sent ice through my veins. My mother, her voice trembling and desperate. Damaris, please, please call us. Your father had a stress attack last night. The doctors say it was not a full heart attack, but he is in the hospital for observation. We have lost everything. The retirement money is gone, and we might lose the house. I do not know what to do. We need you. Please come home. My hand shook as I pressed play on the final message recorded just yesterday. Isabel again, her voice breaking repeatedly. Sis, I really messed up. After the investors backed out, I convinced Mom and Dad to put up the house as collateral for a business loan. Now the bank is threatening foreclosure. Dad blames me. Mom cannot stop crying. They are fighting constantly. I never meant for this to happen. I thought the app would work. I thought I finally had something that would make everyone proud. Please help us. You are the only one who knows how to fix financial problems. We will listen this time, I promise. I set the phone down and walked to the window, staring out at the brick wall that had become strangely comforting in its solidity and simplicity. The messages revealed a familiar pattern: crisis blame, then desperate appeals for rescue. Only this time the stakes were drastically higher than ever before. My first instinct was to book an immediate flight to Chicago, empty my savings, and try to salvage what remained of my parents' retirement and home. The pull of responsibility ingrained since childhood tugged powerfully. I was the reliable one, the fixer, the responsible daughter who sacrificed her needs for family harmony. But something had changed in me during these 2 weeks of separation. I could see the pattern with clarity that had previously eluded me. If I rushed in now with financial rescue, nothing would fundamentally change. The same dynamics would persist: Isabel taking risks without consequences, my parents enabling her while expecting me to provide the safety net, all of us trapped in roles assigned decades ago. I picked up my phone and called the hospital my mother had mentioned in her message. After navigating the automated system and providing my father's information, I spoke with a nurse on his floor. He was admitted with chest pains 2 days ago, she confirmed, but his cardiac enzymes came back normal, and the stress test showed no blockages. The doctor is likely to release him tomorrow with medication for high blood pressure and recommendations for stress management. Relief washed over me. While my father's condition was certainly serious, it was not the life-threatening crisis my mother's message had implied. With that immediate concern addressed, I called Jessica. Can you discreetly find out how bad their financial situation really is? I asked after explaining the voicemails. I can try, she offered. My cousin works at First Midwest Bank. He might be able to give general information without specifics. 2 hours later, Jessica called back. It is not good, but not as catastrophic as they made it sound. They did take a second mortgage about 10 days ago for $75,000. Combined with the retirement fund withdrawal, they invested about $125,000 total in Isabel's venture. The house is worth around $300,000, so they are not underwater yet, but they are definitely overextended. Thank you, I said, processing this information. I appreciate you doing this. What are you going to do? She asked. Not what I would have done 2 weeks ago, I replied. I need to make some calls. Over the next 24 hours, I spoke with a financial advisor specializing in retirement recovery, a real estate attorney who could advise on avoiding foreclosure, and a therapist who worked with families in crisis. I compiled resources, options, and recommendations without contacting my family directly. I also called my new employer at Cascade Financial to explain the situation and request a flexible start date. Family financial crisis, I explained simply. I need to address it before I can fully commit here. Take the time you need, the hiring manager said. The position will be waiting. Family comes first. Her words gave me pause. Family comes first. How often had that phrase been weaponized to demand my sacrifice while excusing others from responsibility? This time, I would define what family comes first meant on my own terms. After careful consideration, I drafted an email to my parents and Isabel from my new account, breaking my silence intentionally and strategically. I have received your messages and understand the seriousness of the situation. I am safe and well, having needed space to reassess our family dynamics after our last interaction. I am willing to help, but not in the way I have in the past. I have arranged for you to meet with financial advisor Robert Williams on Monday at 2 p.m. at his Chicago office. He specializes in retirement recovery and home retention strategies. I will join via video conference. Please bring all financial documents related to the house retirement accounts and the business loan. This is the first step toward resolving the immediate crisis. Further assistance will depend on our conversation during that meeting. I included the advisor's contact information and office address, then pressed send before I could second-guess myself. Within minutes, my phone rang with my mother's number. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to her tearful relief and renewed pleas to call immediately. I responded with a brief text. I am not ready for direct conversation yet. Please focus on gathering the financial documents for Monday's meeting. We will talk then. Firm boundaries were new territory for me, but as uncomfortable as they felt, I recognized their necessity. This crisis offered an opportunity to reset long-established patterns, but only if I maintained the clarity that distance had provided. By Sunday evening, I had compiled a comprehensive assessment of their situation based on the information Jessica had gathered and my own professional knowledge. The picture was concerning, but not hopeless. With proper restructuring, budgeting discipline, and possibly selling some assets, my parents could recover much of their retirement security. The house could be saved if prompt action was taken. The real question was not whether I could help them navigate this financial crisis. I could, and part of me wanted to. The question was whether doing so would perpetuate the unhealthy dynamics that had defined our family for decades, or whether this crisis might become a catalyst for meaningful change. Monday's meeting would determine whether my family truly wanted my help and guidance, or merely my money and acquiescence. It would also reveal whether I had truly changed, or if I would fall back into familiar patterns of self-sacrifice to maintain peace. As I prepared for bed Sunday night, I realized that regardless of the outcome, I had already achieved something significant. I had broken a lifelong pattern of automatic response to family demands. Whatever happened next, that represented growth, I was unwilling to surrender. The conference room of Robert Williams Financial Advisors felt neutral and professional, exactly the environment I had hoped for when arranging this meeting. Through the video screen, I could see my family seated together on one side of a polished oak table, my father looking pale but alert, my mother fidgeting with the tissue, and Isabel uncharacteristically subdued in a conservative blouse rather than her usual trendy attire. Thank you all for coming. I began, my voice steadier than I had anticipated, and thank you, Robert, for facilitating this discussion. The financial advisor nodded professionally. I have reviewed the documentation your parents provided. Shall we begin with a summary of the current situation? For the next 20 minutes, Robert outlined the extent of my family's financial predicament in clear, unemotional terms. The retirement account had been nearly emptied, with significant tax penalties incurred for early withdrawal. The second mortgage had unfavorable terms due to the rushed application. Isabel's business had been incorporated improperly, leaving my parents personally liable for certain expenses. The total deficit approached $140,000, including penalties and accumulated interest. Based on my analysis, Robert concluded, without intervention, foreclosure proceedings could begin within 3 to 4 months. Additionally, there are insufficient retirement assets remaining to provide income security. My father stared at the table while my mother dabbed at her eyes. Isabel looked directly into the camera for the first time since the meeting began, her expression a mix of shame and pleading. Damaris has asked me to present several potential paths forward. Robert continued distributing folders to each of them. I will outline them briefly, then give you time to discuss as a family. The options I had developed with Robert's assistance included restructuring the mortgage with a longer term to reduce monthly payments, selling the house, and downsizing to eliminate the debt entirely, bankruptcy protection as a last resort, and a carefully structured family loan agreement where I would provide enough capital to prevent foreclosure while retaining legal protections for myself. I will step out to give you privacy for your discussion, Robert said, placing a legal pad before them. Please note any questions for when I return. When the door closed behind him, silence filled both rooms for nearly a full minute. You just disappeared, my mother finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. 2 weeks without a word. We thought something terrible had happened. Something terrible did happen, I replied calmly. At our last dinner, I discovered that my place in this family has never been what I thought it was. Dad said Isabel was the one with the bright future. You revealed you had spent my college fund on her activities. When I refused to empty my savings for another of her ventures, I was called selfish and ungrateful. We were upset, my father interjected. People say things they do not mean when they are upset. Do they? Or do they finally say what they truly think when emotions override social filters? I asked. Either way, I needed space to evaluate whether I wanted to continue participating in a family dynamic where I am valued primarily for what I can provide, rather than who I am. That is not fair, my mother protested weakly. Isn't it? I countered. When was the last time either of you asked about my dreams, my goals, my happiness? When Isabel announced her startup idea, you immediately invested your retirement funds. When I mentioned my plan to open my own financial practice, Dad dismissed it as something that could wait because Isabel's needs were more urgent. They always have been. Isabel looked up, tears streaming down her face. You were right about everything. The business plan was full of holes. The market was saturated. I did not understand the technology enough to execute it properly. I just wanted so badly to succeed at something important. You could have succeeded with proper planning and realistic expectations, I said, softening my tone slightly. I wanted to help you do that. Instead, you accused me of jealousy and sabotage. I know, she whispered. I'm so sorry, Damaris. I never thought it would come to this. I never thought Mom and Dad would risk everything. That was our decision, my father said firmly. Do not blame yourself for that part, Isabel. But it is exactly that pattern that brought us here, I pointed out. Isabel takes risks without considering consequences. You two remove all obstacles and cushion all failures. And somehow I end up expected to fix the resulting problems without having had any say in the decisions that created them. My mother wiped her eyes. We never meant to make you feel unvalued, Damaris. We always knew you would be okay because you were so capable, so responsible. Isabel seemed to need more support. Did she need more support? Or did your extra attention create a person who cannot function without it? I asked. By treating us so differently, you harmed both of us just in different ways. My father looked up, meeting my gaze directly, for perhaps the first time in years. Where are you, Damaris? Will you come home and help us sort this out? I am in Seattle, I replied. I have taken a position with a financial consulting firm here and rented an apartment. I am building a new life, one where my worth is not determined by how useful I can be to others. Seattle? My mother looked stunned. You moved across the country without telling us. I needed a clean break to gain perspective. I am willing to help you navigate this financial crisis, but my assistance comes with conditions this time. The three of them exchanged glances before my father asked, What conditions? First, I will not simply write a check and disappear. Any financial assistance will be structured as a formal loan with legal documentation and repayment terms, not a gift or family obligation. Second, all four of us will attend family therapy sessions via video conference. We have patterns that have damaged all of us in different ways. If we do not address them, we will end up back in crisis eventually. Third, Isabel needs to take responsibility for her part in this situation. That means finding employment immediately contributing to the household expenses and developing a repayment plan for her portion of the lost investment. Finally, my parents need to acknowledge that I am building my own life now with goals and priorities that are just as valid as Isabel's. My savings are. For my future, not a family emergency fund. Silence fell again as they absorbed my terms. I had never spoken to them this way before, with clear boundaries and expectations, rather than automatic acquiescence. And if we refuse these conditions, my father finally asked, a hint of his usual authority returning to his voice. Then you will need to pursue one of the other options Robert outlined. Sell the house, restructure independently, or consider bankruptcy protection. I will always be your daughter and Isabel's sister, but I will not sacrifice my well-being or financial security for a family system that consistently devalues me. My mother began to cry in earnest, then not the manipulative tears I had seen often during family disagreements, but deep body-shaking sobs that expressed genuine grief. We never meant to hurt you. We never saw. I never realized. I believe you, I said gently. But impact matters more than intention. You did hurt me repeatedly and deeply. I am willing to work toward healing those wounds, but not by returning to old patterns. Isabel reached across the table and took our mother's hand. I will get a job this week, Mom, and I will start repaying what I can. Damaris is right about everything. My father sat silently for several moments before speaking. I said things I regret deeply, about your future, about your practice being less important. The truth is, I have always been proud of you, Damaris. So responsible, so capable. Perhaps I took that for granted. Perhaps we all did. Thank you for saying that, I replied, feeling a knot in my throat. It means a lot to hear. We spent the next hour discussing practical next steps. Robert returned, and together we developed a preliminary plan. I would provide a structured loan to prevent immediate foreclosure. My parents would consult with a mortgage specialist about refinancing options. Isabel would begin job hunting immediately, and all of us would commit to weekly family therapy sessions. This is just the beginning of a long process, I cautioned as the meeting concluded. Financial recovery takes time. Relationship recovery takes even longer. Will you ever come back to Chicago? My mother asked, her voice small and uncertain. I do not know, I answered honestly. Right now, Seattle feels like the fresh start I needed. I am discovering parts of myself that were buried under family expectations for decades. I need to see where that journey leads before I can answer that question. As we said our goodbyes, I noticed something shift in Isabel's expression, a new awareness in her eyes as she looked at me. I never realized how much I took from you, she said quietly. Not just money or attention, but the chance to be your authentic self. I am truly sorry, sis. It was the most genuine thing my sister had ever said to me. 6 months later, much had changed. My parents had successfully refinanced their mortgage with better terms. My father had retired from teaching as planned, but taken a part-time position as a tutor to supplement their income. My mother had started counseling for her anxiety, which had driven much of her enabling behavior over the years. Isabel had perhaps changed the most dramatically. After securing an entry-level position at a marketing firm, she had enrolled in night classes for business administration, approaching her education with unprecedented discipline. During our now regular video calls, she asked questions about financial planning and budgeting, seeming genuinely interested in developing skills she had previously disdained. As for me, I was thriving in Seattle. My position at Cascade Financial had evolved to include developing educational workshops for women seeking financial independence after divorce or career changes. I had made friends beyond Olivia, joining a sailing club and a community orchestra where I was relearning the violin I had abandoned in childhood. Most importantly, I had discovered a sense of self-worth that existed independently of what I could provide for others. My value was intrinsic, not utilitarian. Setting boundaries had not destroyed my family relationships, as I had feared. Instead, it had created space for more authentic connections, based on mutual respect rather than established roles. The journey was ongoing. Family therapy continued to uncover patterns and triggers that required conscious effort to change. Financial recovery would take years rather than months. Trust, once broken, rebuilt slowly through consistent actions rather than promises or apologies. But for the first time in my life, I was genuinely hopeful about my family's future, not because I had sacrificed myself to maintain harmony, but because I had finally valued myself enough to demand change. Sometimes walking away is the only path to being truly seen. Sometimes those 6 urgent calls waiting on your phone represent not just a crisis, but an opportunity for transformation. And sometimes, the most selfless thing you can do for those you love is to finally, belatedly love yourself first. Have you ever had to walk away from a relationship to gain perspective? What boundaries have you set that changed everything? Share your experience in the comments below, and do not forget to subscribe if this story resonated with you. Thank you for listening to my journey from obligation to empowerment. Remember, you deserve to be valued for who you are, not just what you can provide for others.